Welcome to the Weekly Roundup, the place where we unpack what's been going on in the yoga and wellness world and what we've been coaching our clients through. I'm here with my fellow coaches, Bridget, Josh, and Terry. I'm Carol. And before we started recording, the big topic to start was timing between classes and really how this can affect the client experience, how your teachers show up in your space. I know that for a long time, my studio back in the day was a 30-minute turnover. And yeah, with at the time, in the peak of the days, we would put 60 people in that room. So 60, 120 now going in 30 minutes in and out that was a lot. And so it's interesting now after COVID and well during COVID and we kept it afterwards was now we have an hour between and how that changed everything actually for us. We have felt like to us a nice amount of time to let the prayer class out the door with a lot of attention and gives us a break to do all the cleaning, and then we have another 20 minutes. We broke it into 20 in that hour, and then we start the next class coming in, and it's been something we kept because it was such a nice change for the teachers, for the students, and just for our mental health. I think too, it just can get really, really crazy. And I know when we're coaching, we talk a lot about that. We check in to see like, what is the timing between your classes? Because a big piece of, growing the studio is having a sales conversation. And do you have the time to do that? And Terry was saying she's got a client with an interesting conundrum, I think, with 3 rooms, in fact.
Yeah,
So
three
tell
rooms.
us about that, Terry.
So thanks, Carol. And I use that your studio or your former studio as an example because that is it. It's like this studio is struggling with conversions. And when we really started diving into the first visit flow and looking at the schedule, it's like immediately just leapt out at me. They've got they have 3 rooms. One is a small room. They added reformer Pilates, which is great. So that is not quite as problematic as they have 2 rooms, both of fairly, one's 28, one's 20 capacity, and they have classes starting at the exact same time. And so then it's like, okay. And they sent me a video of the interior of their studio, and it's beautiful. The space is beautiful. And just the way, unfortunately, it's laid out is there's a long walk to where the reception area is. And when I started talking about, well, what about parking? She says, oh, yeah, it can be problematic when the classes are full. And then to kind of on top of that we found out that their reformer Pilates classes are 50 minutes. And for those classes, they basically start and stop at the same time, right? So they only have 10 minutes between. And then even to add, and then granted, it's only 5, but in a case where the Pilates teacher also teaches yoga, they're going from finishing a Pilates class and in 10 minutes are going to teach a yoga class. And I said, well, how are they even able to interact with the people? And the answer was they don't. And then they're coming out of that class to go into right away into another class because the owner, and I get this, I understand this, particularly as a teacher who taught supported myself as a yoga teacher for a decade, is you want to be able to have as a teacher, you want to be able to teach those back to back to back classes. However, when we're looking at the experience, I said to her, the owner, I said, well, how does this impact the client? And she was like, probably not very good. I said, no, not really. So then it becomes, how do we balance, making sure the teachers are accommodated for? Because obviously we want our teachers, we want to provide for our teacher and at the same time that client experience. So it just opened up. We didn't come up with a solution yesterday, but it just opened up this whole can of worms because then I started asking a question, well, what happens when a new person comes in? If you have 2 classes checking in at the same time? She said, oh, well, we just have an iPad set up and then they just go in and check in and go to the room. I said, well, what about a new person? Oh, well, so this is where when you have those tight timelines or classes starting essentially at the same time. Now, granted, this is unique in that there's 3 different rooms. However, We still see it even in a single room where people are trying to stack as many classes so they only have a 15-minute turnaround. Now, maybe you have a small studio or it's not a hot studio, but man, in a hot studio with any capacity, 15 minutes, there is no way you're going to be able to have conversations at the desk with people about what most people do. I mean, it's just thinking about it from not only your teacher's perspective, but most importantly, the client experience, right? Can you reasonably have sales conversations when you've got 25 people coming up, 25 people coming in, you have 15 minutes? Keeping in mind that you've got new people coming out of class, new people coming into class, and if the same teacher's teaching the class, how are they talking to people?
I don't think there's one solve, but it's one of those like if you want to keep the 15 minutes, can you have a shift that's like 20, 30 minutes and you have seven people come in at once to just sort of manage the whole thing? I don't, I know that having a longer time in between classes is recommended and does help. But if somebody's really going to dig their heels in, then solve it a different way. There has to be a solve for it.
Yeah, I think there's always that idea, like you're saying, Carol, like there's not one way to do something, but you still have to solve for the situation. So how are you going to engage people, sell them, whatever? But the other piece of the puzzle here that's semi been said is just I've had two or three calls in this last week where we're talking about like why we're doing something. And in the end, what it whittles down to is we're accommodating the staff. And it's not that you shouldn't ever do that. I don't mean to say it like that, but like honestly, it's your business and you run the business, and the business is not you. It's a separate entity that needs something that you're taking care of. You're responsible for it. Why are we accommodating the staff so much in some of these cases? The staff says, I want to teach a double, a triple, or whatever. Like, yeah, I'm sure you do want to do that. But is that the best for the business? It might not be. Oh, it'd be more convenient if it was 15 minutes between classes because then I could get home earlier to whatever. Be like, yeah, that would be more convenient. But like, is that what the business needs? And ultimately, is that best for the clients? Because I think it sometimes surprises me how much a business will accommodate for their team and not accommodate for their clients who are paying the bills. And again, it's not to say you shouldn't accommodate for your team. You shouldn't do anything like that. It's just, it's fascinating the sort of mentality of it, I guess, that I see. Because this is a pretty recurring thing. It's the same thing I'm sure we'll get here in a minute of like naming classes or the specific time of day or the type of class or the whatever it is. Like, how come it's like this? Because they wanted it like that. Because it would be nice if they could teach a double. That seems nice to them. Yeah. And go ahead, Bridget.
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, well, at some point you said something like a question of like, why are we accommodating the staff like that? And I I actually can't think of a client of mine who I haven't had a conversation like this with. And one of the big reasons, especially for newer studio owners, that comes up a lot is I came from a toxic yoga studio, or I had a toxic boss before, and I don't want to be anything like them. So we're creating this space where everybody can be themselves and express themselves and like be the teachers that they want to be. And I want to be a nice boss, not a mean boss. And I love that instinct. I love where I love where your head's at. And also, I think this is just a fundamental misunderstanding of what good leadership looks like. And of course, people don't know what good leadership looks like because most people have not been trained in leadership. And most people, and there's all sorts of like gender dynamics here too, but it is normal to go into your first job, especially as a business owner, because there's not that sort of rising up the ranks and slowly getting more and more responsibility and taking on more and more leadership. Suddenly you're just thrust in and you're the top of the pyramid all of a sudden. And you're just like, I have to be a leader now. And it is such a journey to get there. Um, and I guess that's sort of, I'll just leave it there.
Well, it's interesting you said toxic environments, and it made me think, Bridget, that I think with extreme exceptions, obviously, I think toxic environments, my feeling is, and my experiences, and based on a lot of experience and years, blah, 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 is that a toxic environment typically happens when there's not clear policies and procedures and how we do things, where the toxicity, I think, can come from trying to be too reasonable and too nice so that, yeah, on target, so that you have a group of people over here who are getting preferential treatment, let's just call it that, versus, and now I think, well, why can't I have that? And so that's, I think, and a good example, I had this experience where one of the studios I initially taught at early on is the teacher was supposed to be there 45 minutes before class. And of course, having hashtag Terry's dad on time is late, I was there ready to go. I got to the studio probably 60 minutes before class that I needed to be there so that I was ready at 45 before. And then I know for a fact that there were people that were showing up 20 minutes after that. And that irritated me. And I'm a woman in my 50s at this point, and that bothered the crap out of me because I'm like, wait a second, I'm doing what I need to do, and there's no accountability for the people who aren't showing up when they need to show up consistently. Hey, everybody gets that one up. I'm running late, the kid's sick, the dog, whatever. Yes, I'm talking about consistently. So I think that toxicity is allows to fester and brew and resentment when there aren't things that are clearly defined.
I think the like night, like I don't want to be the bad guy boss situation is I've said that myself for sure. Absolutely in business. And I've had some bosses that were butt heads for sure. But if I look back at like what is it that I'm trying to not be? Most of the time, the toxic bosses who were assholes, it's because they were shitty at their job. Like they were not only not a good leader and maybe not nice, it's like actually they were a disorganized person, own personal shit together, you know? They weren't highly skilled necessarily at the thing that we were doing. They were very judgmental, like had no responsibility, even though they were the boss, like didn't take responsibility for anything else. They just had an expectation everyone was going to be able to do something. And they had no communication skills. And so, like, all you could sum that all up into leadership, but none of that list is that they were a mean person at heart or like that we couldn't have had a beer and got along necessarily, sort of thing. I think that the thing you got to look at sometimes this like accommodation piece and why that's happening, like you're saving something in yourself. It's like you're trying to be liked and because that's comfortable for you and feels safe. And that's actually what you're prioritizing over what's best for the business, of course, but also honestly what's best for the staff. I hate that that it seems like this, but I don't know. I'd be curious to your guys' thoughts on this. I think at some point you come to the conclusion that you can either prioritize being liked or you can be a good leader. I don't think you can do both from a priority standpoint. It doesn't mean that being a good leader you won't be liked. But from a focal priority standpoint, I don't think you can do both. I think you have to just decide I've got to be willing to just straight piss someone off and have them not like me to be a good leader to them. I think that's just how it works.
I 100% agree. And a great example of that is military, because it's such a hierarchical structure. I've mentioned him before, I've talked about him before, and I posted Simon Sinek is someone that I really greatly admire. He does wonderful podcasts and stuff on leaderships, and he talks a lot about this. And to your point, I think if you have strong leadership skills, if you're a good leader, you don't need to like me, but you'll respect me. And I think oftentimes we confuse being liked and like and respect as one, and they're not. You cannot like someone, you cannot agree with someone, but you can respect them and what they're doing. And ultimately, I feel that if you earn the respect, maybe they'll never be your bestie and go for a beer, but they're like, he's a decent person. He's a decent, or she's a decent human being. She's not someone I would hang out with, but I do like her as a fellow human being. So I feel that liking someone follows respect. And conversely, you can really like someone a lot and not respect them at all.
Yeah, definitely.
I think there are far more people that we like that we don't respect than we respect and don't like, because I think we confuse that respect and like.
I do want to just say that I think it's pretty common, especially when often you're dealing with young people, I think, in this industry. And I do think it's pretty common that the that people don't really have the emotional maturity to know that they can respect someone without liking them. And I think that this is I think a lot of people, like you were saying, Terri, kind of confuse the two. And I actually think it's very common that someone does something that we would all consider very respectable, and and when they lose that they also usually technically lose the respect of these people. And I just think that that's yeah, I can't think of a ton of people I've had in my employment who I can think of one or two, I guess, who once I did set a boundary, they were able to be like, you know what? I don't like Bridget, but I respect her. I just don't think that that's at least in my experience, that hasn't been really common. But something you said, Terri, actually in a comment earlier, I just thought was so brilliant, that the problem with accommodating staff is that eventually you're going to have a staff member who you either don't want to accommodate or you can't accommodate. And then you're in that loop that you were talking about, Terri, of favoritism and probably some of that same toxic stuff that you were trying to avoid in the first place. You can't just, and that's just such a good practical reason why you can't, why it's a really slippery slope to start accommodating specific teachers of you can name your class and you can pick the class time of this. I have a couple clients right now who have some weird things on their schedule where there's 6 a.m.s across the board and then a random 5:30. And it's always because when I ask about it, it's always because there's, the teacher needs to get, home to feed the dogs or whatever before work. So, and like I said, I get it, but it's a slippery slope.
Also, something you said too, Bridget, is I will also say that there's a difference between, being a good leader and respect. You can like someone, not like someone, and still respect them. Is when you said emotional maturity, let me tell you, there are plenty of people that my age that are not emotionally mature. Conversely, there are 20 somethings and even teenagers who have more emotional maturity than a 60-year-old. So that's another thing that's interesting too, is often you think, oh, because someone's old, it's like, not necessarily. In fact, I was talking to a client, this was a while back, about a staff member, just problem after problem. And I was like, well, I was thinking based on what, again, judging with preconceived ideas, I was thinking it was someone in their early 20s. It turns out she was not much much younger than I was. But she just was like, wow, that sounds like a behavior practically of a teenager. but not the case. So again, as we always like to say, people will people. We're dealing with human beings, and that is straight up, I think, 100% the hardest part of being a business owner.
I mean, this is part of how lucky you are. You
Yeah.
decided to be an entrepreneur and you get to develop around these things, emotional maturity or not. Like, this is the thing that will, emotional maturity is obviously like EQ is a superpower in general. But if you run a business, especially a service business, especially a service wellness business, you will develop this skill or you will die. Like it just, if you give it long enough, it just, not literally, although maybe, it just there's no choice. And so that's kind of the beauty of it because I think that a lot of people can actually go through a lot of their life and not be forced into a scenario to have to figure their own stuff out around this. But if you're going to be a leader in a business, you will have to because it'll just keep hitting you in the face over and over and over until you do. The like respect thing, I agree, Terry, with what you're saying, but I like what you just said, Bridget, too, that, especially in the beginning, if you like someone, I think the naive, like young person version of it is that when you like them, you respect them. And then that if you don't like them, then you don't respect them. Or if you stop respecting them, you stop liking them. Like there is an attachment there that does separate later. To me, I think the actual awareness piece as a leader, manager, business owner that isn't nearly voiced enough directly, although I feel like is what's trying to be solved for in accommodating is personal dignity.
Mm,
To demonstrate respect to someone that's under your employ, it's maintaining their dignity. If you can do that, then usually you're going to be, now they might still emotionally react to the situation, but if you can do that and they can feel that and everyone can see that, you'll be in the quote safe zone of difficult situations most of the time, in my experience. The bosses that are toxic that I think any of us have had that we hate, that's what it is they attack your dignity and make you feel like a piece of shit. And that's the part that, like, why would anyone want to feel like that ever? In any circumstance, in any relationship. And a boss is a relationship. So it's like, if you reverse that and you're the person that's being the leader, your job is to help be respectful and maintain the person's dignity, but it's not necessarily to then do that by accommodating them or appeasing them or being nice to them or not enforcing on boundaries that are real. Those things both are true at the same time. And I think that that's one of the things that I see a lot of the time in the wellness industry, yoga studios as the example we've been talking about here, that the owner's trying to do, like not they're not directly saying this and therefore not they haven't like perfectly articulated or perfectly accurately identified that this is the thing they're trying to do. And so they're doing it through they're like coming to a solution to a problem they haven't entirely defined just yet. And so I think that that's in part how you end up with, well, sure, every other class on the schedule is at 6 a.m., but you want it at 5:30? No problem. Because you
I,
have dogs? Okay.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
always dogs. It's always fucking dogs behind the scene that are screwing the shit up. I tell you what.
I had a perfect example of this with a client on Monday is one of their front desks was kind of not kind of was being late and it turns out that the woman has car problems and her car needs to be it's the catch 22. It's more money than it's worth to fix, but she doesn't have the money to buy a new car. So she's decided not to have a car. And so she's kind of been begging rides from like the teachers and things like that. And well, that's a short-term solution because the teacher doesn't have to be there the same time the front. She's constantly late. So it's like, what kind of accommodation do we make in that situation? And the owner was just really struggling with that. And basically what we came to is the leadership part is yes, I understand this is where, I understand the situation And, you have been late. We need to solve for that. And if this is something, because the needs of the business are this, when you're not here, there's this cascade effect. If this is something that you're not going to be able to solve to be here on time, then we are going to need to find someone else to take these shifts. She's able to make it for a couple, but not all of them.
Yeah.
Right. And that was like, yes, she's a lovely person and she's good at what she does, but if the owner had made this accommodation saying, okay, it's okay if you're late 2 days, 2 shifts all the time, where's the equity in that with all the other staff? That's where toxicity, I think, starts again.
Yeah. And I think too, like this is a perfect example of you can respectfully have this conversation and hold the boundary. One technique specifically that might be helpful that was coming up as you were talking through that, Terri, is like you don't put it on them, but you co-create the outcome. So you formulate it as a question. Like, hey, like it's my job to just hold everyone accountable to the fact that like we need to be here on time for this and this for the shift, and that's fair across the team for everyone because it's about, the vision, the mission, the whatever, the person coming in that we're serving. That's where I'm coming from with all of this. It's been like 2 or 3 times now that this is happening. So I wouldn't their personal side, I wouldn't even bring into the equation at all. What do you think we can do? Or how can I help you in this case? And just have the discussion through that lens. But this is a perfect example of, because this is the other thing that I feel like owners get themselves in trouble with. I was having an HR conversation yesterday for sort of an HR thing that we're developing behind the scenes here. And owners so often make they make or they allow the employee to make the employee's problems, or the owner does this themselves too. It's like you're making your problems my problems, and they're not business problems. And like the line is pretty clear in business for the most part. Like if we actually just objectively look at it in most scenarios, if you get outside of your business and your situation and look at someone else's and write on paper what the scenario is, usually it's much clearer than we think it is. Like, well, but we have this history of this and like, no, if you just write it all down and look at it in an external business, you're like, it's pretty darn clear where this is a Carol problem or this is a Josh problem, not a business problem, not a this together problem. And so you got a car, you don't have a car, you can afford to fix it or not. Like, cool. As your friend, I can hear all that. I'll hear you out. I don't have to whatever. But also, like, that's not my job to solve whatsoever. Unless I got a car that I'm selling, I'd be like, I'll sell you my car. I don't know. You know.
I was just going to underline something I had written it down on my little post-it, but you mentioned it, Josh, that I think could be an actual, like, very practical step for an owner who's kind of trying to figure this all out because it's overwhelming and it's so much and it's yeah so um understanding the why you have behind all of your policies, like for why does it matter, and instilling that in your staff. Like my staff gets on the first day before they do anything, they under their first training shift, they hear about our mission and our vision, and they hear about like why we care about attention to detail and getting to the studio on time. And it all leads back to like what yoga is meant to do for humans. And if you truly believe that you are creating a better, safer place for healing when your staff is there on time and when the music is on, when people get there, and when the right diffuser is going, which I do, then it isn't as hard to hold those boundaries. And the same thing goes for why you name your classes and why you have 15 minutes, but or more than 15 minutes between them. Like all of these contribute to the yoga part, the part where we are actually trying to like help heal people and change their lives. And if you can hold that really tight, then it's not about anyone. It's not about who's in front of you. It's just about your mission and your vision. Josh.
Yeah, well said. I 100% agree. This directly ties into sales. We talk about this in sales all the time. Terry's doing reps today in the rep room, by the way. So, for those of you who hadn't heard, the rep room is where you just get to go and practice. Right now, we're doing sales reps. They just actually do a practice or whatever inside of our community. It's not like how to do something, it's come and actually practice it and give feedback on the practice of it. But in sales, we say this all the time too, that like one of the hardest things to really own, to really unpack, if you go all the way down the rabbit hole, is if you really believe your product can save someone's life, you have a moral obligation to serve it to them to the best of your ability. If you are unwilling to pitch someone what you're doing, how much do you really believe in it? And to most of the service providers, a yoga teacher, this happened. I was having a conversation recently with a HIIT gym operator, and they had their manager on. And real bluntly, I guess, is just it was very clear by the end of the conversation, the manager gave no shits about the classes that they were offering or what they were like the training they were doing. Like they had not drunk the Kool-Aid at all. This was just a job. They just thought working out was kind of cool. They had no like deep mission driven belief, whatever around it, which fine. But this was the manager, like the primary operator in the business. And so where the tension came up was in sales. And Bridget, to your point, in a few other arenas as well, where it's like they didn't want to enforce on the team to do this and they were trying to accommodate that. And then all the crux of it all came down to like, well, you don't really believe what we're doing. Like, you're arguing for the team to try to accommodate them to make the situation nice for someone who's an instructor who doesn't want to come in at this time or whatever else. And you're willing to sacrifice the business, what's best for the client, the actual product, the profit margin, like all of that, you're willing to throw out for this other thing and actually argue against it. Well, yeah, but I mean, like, it's not like that important to train at this, whatever, whatever. I was like, holy cow, I can't even believe. Unfortunately, it's one of the few times that I pulled a Terry and it was like, I didn't actually say it on the call, of course, but I'm like, you need to have a come to whatever insert word you want conversation with this person or get them out of there. Like, this is gonna blow up in your face real bad. But it all came down to this belief thing because yes, the owner who totally believes in it, like, why did you start this thing? This is the HIIT class, isn't it? No, it's not. It does this, but like they right away, and you can see they like light up. Their belief in what they were doing was so deep. It's the hill they're going to die on. So you got to kind of come from that place in your business in general. Sales is a good example of it, but it's the same thing here with this accommodation of things. I'm willing to hold this boundary. It won't be hard if you're really all the way bought in. Sometimes I feel like you have to go through the mental effort of unpacking that a little bit for yourself. It's
You
like you
know,
feel it, but can you take full ownership of it?
and you know where that all starts, besides yourself. It starts with your hiring and your job description. Because I think a lot of times studio owners of businesses get in trouble. When I say get in trouble, get people that are not buying in and not seeing the vision and understanding the why, or whatever it is they don't have a job description that actually articulates what they are hiring for. right? And I'm working with one of they a massage business, sports massage, and working to hire front desk. And we have on it, this job is not for you if, right? We actually wrote out, you'd rather hide in the back than chat with new clients and make people feel welcome. Talking about memberships, packages, or services makes you instantly uncomfortable. A busy front desk with phones ringing and clients arriving feels overwhelming instead of energizing. Learning new booking systems or studio processes makes you want to run for the door. Helping people relax, heal, and feel better about their bodies just doesn't light you up. So, I mean, straight up called it. It's like this, if you don't like to do these things, don't even bother applying. Because I think that's where working with a lot of clients through the years is there's this big overwhelming disconnect. And I always go back to the front desk. It's not just about checking somebody in. And this is what this addresses. It'll be interesting to see what type of candidates they get because this is just what she's about to launch on this week. But I'm liking this idea of putting in this job is not for you if, because then it's like very clear.
Yeah.
I'll
It's
say
a
I
section
use it.
we,
It doesn't do much in my experience. People just apply anyway. In my
Well,
just
we'll see. We'll
I've done
see.
yeah.
that. And maybe that I need to tweak the language or whatever, but people just apply anyway because they want to work. They think they want to work in a yoga studio, but they don't.
They want the free
I,
yoga
I
membership that comes along with employment.
I feel like a lot of people that I had apply, one person in particular that even worked for me for a while at our last studio, it wasn't even about the yoga studio. They subconsciously almost thought it was like a cushy job. Like, oh, I'm going to get paid, and I just say hi to people at the desk and sign them in on the computer. And then they'd be like a week into training and be like, wow, there's like a lot. I'm like, yeah. And we're only halfway, dude. We haven't even started yet. I hired a dude once. He actually said to me straight up, like a month in, he's like, I thought I was just gonna come in and like be able to do my homework. I'm like, you thought you were gonna come here and sit at the desk and I was gonna pay you to do your homework? He's like, well, when you say it like that, I'm like,
Well,
yeah, that's not how we roll. It was like all good. He was a great employee after the fact, but it was just, yeah, I
I
don't know
have a
what people
client that now
expect.
what they do with their front desk in particular is when they get it down to the final candidates, they invite them in to even before they hire them to watch and observe. They put them on, they come into the busiest day, whether it's an evening or a Saturday. I have them come in and sort of shadow what's happening so they have an idea of really what the job entails. And she said that has been really helpful in weeding out people who are like, wow, they appear on paper and everything, conversation great. When they actually go in and see it, they're like, oh no, this isn't for me.
You give them the coyote ugly treatment. Okay, here we go. Sink or swim. What about naming classes, class styles, the times? We were talking about that. This is something that comes up all the time, but this is part of this accommodation standpoint. I'm working with a couple clients right now. We have sort of a process that we go through, and it's funny. The one team that I'm working with on the process is like your class descriptions, your product development, like how do you get that sort of best defined? Um, Especially, and in this case, it's exactly the scenario where it's like they've been going for like 20 years. And so you'd think that they've got this thing super dialed, and it's the reverse. It's so complex. And they got a little frustrated with me because we have a good relationship, and they were really expressing that with some intensity. They're just like, well, it feels like we're going in a circle. You said this, and now you say that, and whatever. And it's like, I'm like, yeah, but this is a different part of what we're doing. Long story short, we're finally like coming to the end, and they're like, oh, I can see why we had to go through this process to get there. But what's amazing is we went from like 23 class types to three categories and maybe seven total classes. Like there just wasn't actually that much different going on. And the naming made no sense before, and nothing was really brand centric. And so it's a common thing that happens. And I double checked with them. How did we get here? They came out of the Ashtanga world where it was like, well, we just only taught this one class and that was it. And then we added another one because someone wanted to teach it. And then we added another one. And then we opened another studio and took on some classes from that. And like it just grew by itself. There was kind of no rhyme or reason to it. But in the end, it was one of the things we identified. It was actually hindering their business. And so that's why we went down the rabbit hole of adjusting this.
Well, I had my favorite, and now I have a rival for my favorite that just came up yesterday. And my favorite to this point of yesterday was a client, and we were slow yen. And when I first saw that, I went, "How can you?" I said, "How?" I couldn't help it. My face was so right. How can yen get in any more? You just like lay in one posture the whole time. She said, "Well," and here's the thing. Here's the litmus test. The owner could not tell me what the class was. And then I asked, and she said, "Oh, that's what the teacher wanted to call it." And so we solved that. And then yesterday, I'm looking at the schedule, and this studio has, they're basically vinyasa, and they have vinyasa, and then they had, and it's hot. It's all hot. The yoga's all hot. So vinyasa, hot vinyasa, and then they had hot, slow flow, which makes sense from, it's a slow. Then I looked at the class and I thought it was a typo. I went, what is hot, slow, flow, yen?
So good.
And she was like, oh, well, it's just a slower version, I think. And I'm like, really? And she said, well, it's almost more like a yin class. I said, well, why not call it a yin class? She said, oh, because that's what the teacher wanted to call it. So now I have two favorites, slow yin and slow flow. And guess what? Only one teacher taught slow flow. Wild.
They should have called it sloth slow.
Sloth slow. Oh, there we go.
Sloth flow.
Sloth slow. I like that.
Yeah.
Sloth slow. Yeah.
Sloth slow. Sloth flow yin. I have to just comment that, like, in part, and I don't mean this to cast shade and on anyone individually, but more to like
no shade at all.
Point at the thought process behind it. Like, man, in the service industry and in the wellness world where we have especially classes and programs and stuff like this, the collective ego of the teacher base is so fascinating, how intense it is and how counter that is to a lot of what's being preached. But just the ego of like, my class is so unique and specially different. It deserves an entirely different name altogether because you couldn't possibly understand what it is unless I gave it this name and description, which then if you read generally, and I'm going to the extreme, says something so vague, you're like, I have literally no fucking clue what we're going to do in this class whatsoever. If it did, at least it says flow in the name, because if it didn't, I wouldn't know that there was going to be a flow. But actually, I'm not sure, like, does this mean we're doing a vinyasa or no? But I'm not really sure because it doesn't even say that. Like, the ego of it is so fascinating. And just the reason that matters is that the second that is the primary driver, it's about you and not about the client. And the whole existence of your job and of the business is service of the people coming in. So it's weird.
That and the teachers that when you do give them a structure, like, I can't, this is my class and this is how I teach it, and they're not willing to change. Like, that's just wild. And there are a lot of owners that allow that. So going a little bit backwards, I feel like you can have a lot of belief in the thing, in your product, in your business, and you still have to be willing to have uncomfortable conversations. And I feel like that in sales, like, your team can believe in the thing, but they have to be willing to get uncomfortable. And same with the owner. So it's just sort of was I'm thinking about while you guys are talking, and like, if there's a teacher like that, that this is my class and this is what I want to name it, and this is the time I need because I need to let my dog out at a specific time. Like, what are we doing here? Who is running the show? I just have the uncomfortable conversation. I just feel like going, yeah. Go ahead, Terry.
Well, actually, what you just described in that situation, and this goes back to one what we have all the time, that is an independent contractor. That is a teacher who is truly an independent contractor. This is the type of class I teach. This is how I teach it. This is what I want to teach it, and this is what I want to call it. That is the essence of what an independent contractor is no control. Because the issue with independent contractor in the United States is it's the whole thing of control or not. So if that's a teacher and then you're trying to make him an employee, I mean, that's the difference. It's
In
the issue
part,
in
I don't
part,
know.
but it is
I could counter debate this though, because this is like hiring a painter. If you hire a painter, you still pick the paint, you still pick which walls being painted on which
right.
house, you pick the finish of the paint, you still have the allowance to negotiate with them the end product and result and within what timeline that it happens.
You absolutely have the option to negotiate. And I'm just saying that's it. This came up again this week about whether someone was an independent contractor or an employee. Again, full disclosure, we are not lawyers. We're not, so, but this based on everything that this person told me, I just said, I am like 99.99% sure this is an employee status. I would strongly encourage you, and this came up in our community too, I would strongly encourage you to check with the governing authority in your state and at the IRS, because if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, tastes like a duck, it's a fucking duck.
They're employees.
They're employees.
I don't know. Like I get it. And we operated this way too for a little bit in the studio that I managed and other businesses. There's it's just not as gray zone as you think it is in most of Western culture. That's the thing. We want to play it up that it is. To Terry's point, though, the reason to go down the rabbit hole of checking and speaking to a lawyer who understands it in your specific country, state, province, region, whatever, is so that you can have the right checks and balances in place in either case. If you're going to keep them as an independent contractor and you can, what would be the burden of proof pieces for that, and make sure that you have that. Because that's the other thing that I see is just if it kind of is on the line, maybe like you could make a debate for it in a certain market, but then any of the pieces that would be like the proof of it aren't there. And so you want to know what that is. But I think more importantly than this, the whole control element, if it's me, like I want to ask people who I've hired inside my business to do the job that's necessary. That is the priority. And so that's the relationship that I would need. If having someone as an independent contractor stops that from being possible, then that doesn't work. Everything else aside. And so the technical legal side of it aside, it's more just like going back to the original thought or question. What's the name of the class? How long is it? The formulation of the class, some of the stylistic pieces, what is or isn't on brand for engagement with people, et cetera, et cetera. These are things in any other product on the planet. The owner of the business does the product development and design. It's only in the wellness industry, in boutique fitness, yoga's the worst. It's the most notorious for this. It's one of the only industries I know of where you would hire someone who's got some sort of training that you might never have heard of ever, that uses a name, but then offers a product that is incongruent with your version of it, that you would even maybe disagree with the way they do something, and you're just like, whatever, you just decide what it's called and what to do with it and whatever else. The painter analogy, it's like saying, I want to paint my house, Bridget. Here's money, paint my house. And you're like, well, what finish and which walls? And do you want one color or two? Or do we do tones? Or what color should it be? And I'm like, I don't know, you pick. Which actually would be an interesting experiment. But there's nowhere else that we would see it like this. It's such a fascinating thing. And it makes it difficult for a business and I really don't think that at first wellness businesses understand the impact of this. What you create is confusion. You muddy the waters. Your clients don't know what it is. Your staff doesn't know what it is. You don't have they can't build a system around it. Like it has a cascading negative effect that spirals out in way more ways than you think, usually.
Yeah, do you think Apple grew into a global dominant brand because Steve Jobs says, yeah, go do whatever you want with that iPhone or that
What do you
iPad?
think we should do?
What do you
Yeah.
think we should do?
Yeah.
No, he was notorious for demanding
Yeah.
excellent in product and stuff like. And I still say, even though I'm not an Apple user, Apple products are beautiful.
Mhm.
They really are.
I
Like you pick
mean,
up, they're just, yeah, they're just beautiful. And I don't even use Apple.
It's
My,
not too, you could come over to this
I know
side.
much to the,
No,
come
there's
over to the
nothing
dark
holding you
side.
back.
I-
You
You can do
know,
it
you know what?
anytime.
Here's my prediction.
it's
Here's my
on the radar.
prediction.
It's on there. I'm going to have to get a new phone this year. My phone is just limping along at this point, and it is now, I'm actually considering getting an iPhone, especially since they have the iPhone
Whoa,
is,
whoa, what?
whoa,
Wait,
yes,
what?
wait, what? And
Hey,
especially since they are launching a lower end, a phone that's a little less expensive than some of the Wham Bam spots, shiny things. So, and then everybody's advised me I should go to the Apple store. So I might even make an appointment and go to the Apple store. So,
Oh my
oh
gosh.
my
If
God.
any of you are listening to this and you don't know about this yet,
You
you don't
bring it.
understand. Years, years.
and you're all just casually like, well, I'm just gonna make an appointment at the Apple store.
Store. In
There.
fact, years ago with a WhatsApp group, we had a WhatsApp group, and Mara named it. Mara's our Wizard of Ops. She named it because Terry doesn't have an iPhone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
we're like, we're not having your green text mess up our iMessage
Yeah,
chat here. We can't do
exactly.
anything. Get out of
Because
here.
there's something I couldn't do because I have an ad for it, and it was the WhatsApp group was called because Terry doesn't have an iPhone.
So true.
I
I'm
predict Terry makes this move, and it's going to be the moment Starlink and these other companies who are developing devices finally come out with something that's actually objectively better than an Apple product. That'll be the moment. Poor Terry.
Okay, what can I say?
Terry, I 100% support this. I will buy you whatever phone case you want on the planet if you get an Apple phone. I would,
Okay, you have heard it live, Josh. If I get an iPhone,
yep,
he's going to buy me a case. Okay, I might take you up on that.
yep. Terry's gonna find like some gold-plated, titanium-backed ninja case or something.
it's
Fine, whatever.
It's probably going to be red because I like red.
oh, nice.
Okay, totally off topic, but on topic. I don't know. Talking about creating value. We've always talked about creating value. Maybe this is how we wrap. I don't know. Because I mentioned last week that Outlander started, final season of Outlander started, and it's on Stars. I subscribe to Stars specifically. I actually paid them because I want to watch Outlander. And I signed up for an annual because they're having a heck of a deal. And then I texted I have a sibling, my sibs and I, we text all the time. So we have a group. And I texted them and said, my message said, I would pay a premium price to Stars if they on that subscription would drop Outlander all at once because I am a wreck after one episode. I have no idea how I'm going to make it to the last episode in May. And I
Mm.
seriously would pay a very premium price to have the ability to binge Outlander in one weekend.
This is actually a fascinating statement. Side note, is the original woman still in Outlander? Like, is she still alive? Like,
That you mean the woman who wrote the books or the woman who's the
no, like
actress?
the main character.
Oh, they're both Jamie and Claire are both alive. Although they've dropped a little hint that from the future there's a. Oh, I don't want to hit any spoilers. So if anybody's out there, I don't want to say any spoilers. So
I
no
mean,
spoilers. I'm just saying at this point, after episode 1, season 8, Jamie and Claire are still very much alive. and
Okay.
they got
That
a
answers every
really
question I need
great
to know. Thank
surprise.
you. Now I don't need to watch multiple seasons because I don't care. No, but what's interesting about what you just said was I would pay extra to have this ability to have this service. So one, there's an upsell that like this is a conversation I was having recently in this group that I was in because we were talking about Stranger Things on Netflix and how there was all this hype for the fifth season, and the way that they dropped it out at the end of last year was really fascinating because they didn't drop the whole thing. Obviously, it was all done, but they also didn't drip it out week by week. They like gave you whatever number of like half of it, or what was it, three? Was it three drops? Or maybe four? Yeah. You got like a few episodes
We got
here and they,
four and then a second. Yeah, it was dropped
right.
in two. And then the finale, I think, was the last thing that was
That's what
actually.
it was.
Yeah.
They had two drops in the finale and they were on like Thanksgiving weekend holiday, Christmas, and New Year's, which sounds weird, but like everyone's at home. Everyone's gonna watch. So like their spike in viewership was insanity during that time. And then it has continued on since or whatever. But like there's a whole social science to this now that's being studied around these different things. Because at first there was this debate, like, do you drip it out? And then you get the Terri scenario where it's like, I'm so hungry for the next episode. I can't wait for the next one. And that's the TV methodology. Netflix, on the whole, of the product of Netflix, did. Oh my gosh. Terry's
When you
closing one
started
screen for
screen
the viewers
sharing, I was
listening.
like, are we about to watch Outlander together?
I'm like, are we doing an Outlander watch? But then Netflix, in part, if you look at its product arc and like how it has a couple of like really interesting moments of explosion. One of them is it was the major pioneer, although it didn't actually originate them, of just drop the whole thing in one go and let everyone just like lean into the fact that people want to binge watch because people still to this day make the statement, Outlander would be an example, I'm going to not watch it until it's done so I can binge the whole thing.
Yeah. House of
And
Cards is the what kicked that off. House of Cards, I think, was like the first one they dropped, Netflix dropped, that was all at once. I think it was House of Cards. Or that was the one that
hmm,
showed that people want to watch it.
I don't know. I mean, maybe that was a great show, by the way. But in any case, how do you like translate this into what you like, what you're doing and building? Basically, what we're talking about is building hype around something and having this like idea of once I've made the decision that I want in on this, I want all of it in one go. I want the full thing. Or do you purposefully hold back and build this tension around things? We talk about this a lot in marketing. This plays into any business that's
Mhm.
out there because the psychology is the same. So
Creating a
it's kind
premium
of a
membership. Creating a premium
yeah,
membership.
it's the idea of like premium memberships where the type of access you get changes. It's the idea of if you're launching a new product line, like if you're going to add a hot Pilates class into your yoga studio, or recently there's a reformer studio took over the spot next to them, was adding in a mat Pilates, but they were doing it more like HIIT style. Um, Instead of just being like, surprise, we've got this, and now it's on the schedule 5 days a week, doing these like pop-ups and invite only MVP thing. And like in the best scenario that I've seen in launches like this, we did it over 2 full months. It was long to the point that like by the time it finally hit the schedule, every single class 100% full up, like full. And there's also a strategy with how you scale the schedule up or whatever too. But because it didn't just all get dropped at once in that scenario, it was like we had to get the right people seeing it or participating in it and build the hype around it and sort of do this slow burn towards it coming back out. Well, I guess that's it.
I
So
guess that's it.
now that everyone's just like, well, I got to go watch Outlander.
Actually, you have to wait.
I have to wait. And actually, one thing I did find out is it airs on, it's Friday night. It's Fridays. Well, they launched it last Friday, March 6th, but I could actually watch it at 12:01 a.m. tonight because they drop it.
Obsessed.
Tomorrow is Friday, so they drop it. So, but no, Friday night, tomorrow night will be Outlander and The Pit. That's my other new favorite one is The Pit.
Terry, you know who else has this behavior?
Who?
People who are super obsessed with like the new iPhone and they wait in line like the night before and they camp in line to make sure they get it right away on the day that it launches or whatever. Just saying, in your
Well,
heart.
think back. You said line. Think back to the days. I still remember standing in a huge line to see Star Wars. I mean, back in the day when they had the mega
Yeah,
blockbusters, you couldn't pre-buy tickets. People would like camp out overnight to get
that's
tickets
true.
and things like that. So, I mean, that's where the hype can go, which could be, especially if you're thinking of opening a new business or a new studio or something like that, thinking about the hype you can create
Mm.
beforehand around something.
It's a good point, actually. It's the busy restaurant theory that we talk about often. Like, it's good to have a lineup. It's good to turn people away. I feel like what's happened now in some of the cities in the studio world is that a place is quite busy, and because pre-booking is the norm, if you don't pre-book for certain classes and you can't get in, but if you're not someone who's already in the community, you don't really understand that and the timeline of it, and you don't have the correct pass for it. So actually, it does the reverse where you get really frustrated. Thinking about some studios that were in LA, for example, and it was like even a week in advance to try to get to the class next Saturday, you couldn't do it. There was no class you could take. So you're like, well, I'm just not going to go there. Not exactly the same thing. Now, obviously, it does insinuate value of that, but that's not exactly the same scenario. Same business. They do an open house, and strategically, they're like, there is no pre-registration. You cannot reserve a spot for these classes. You have to just show up for the class, line up out the door, big hoopla. It like made the news, all of a sudden. So, yeah, interesting. All right, get a lineup out your door,
Get an iPhone.
build hype.
Watch watch Outlander.
Get an iPhone. My
I
God.
don't know. Well, it's been a year. Yeah, no, we'll have to see. I had to get new tires last month, so
Tires, iPhone, I don't
well, no, I had to
know.
get the tires. iPhone. That's why it's like,
One's more useful than the other.
anyways.
Well,
All
see you
right.
next time.
Well, I think that's a wrap on this week's Weekly Roundup. Tune in every
Agree.
Friday and make sure you subscribe to the show on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you're listening from. See you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Watch Outlander.